They see the headlines, they hear the sound bites. But what they don't see, what they don't hear, is the depth of the storm gathering beneath the surface. This isn't about scandals on TV or courtroom drama splashed across the news cycle. No, this is about something far more dangerous, far more enduring. It's about a system tearing at the seams, about a nation divided so deeply that even the strongest leader cannot escape the weight of history pressing down. The trouble is not just political, it's cultural, economic, and moral. It's a test of loyalty, a battle of narratives, a fight over the very soul of the republic. Enemies abroad watch with sharp eyes, waiting for the moment when distraction becomes collapse. Allies whisper in doubt, wondering if America can still lead. And inside the homeland, the people are forced to choose between truth and illusion, strength and chaos, survival and surrender. This story isn't just about one man. It's about a nation staring into a mirror and not liking what it sees. And the deeper you look, the more you realize the trouble runs far beyond headlines, far beyond politics, far beyond what America is willing to admit to itself. Beneath the noise of headlines and the chatter of endless news cycles lies something more dangerous, something that cannot be dismissed with sound bites or shrugged off as political theater. It is the slow cracking of foundations, the kind that begins quietly and invisibly until the weight above them becomes too great to hold. A nation can withstand arguments, protests, and even scandals. But when the very structures of power, loyalty, and legitimacy begin to fracture, the storm that follows is far greater than anyone imagines. These cracks are not created overnight. They form over years through choices made in silence, through compromises justified as temporary, through loyalties traded for short-term gain. At first, they are easy to ignore. Leaders reassure themselves that the system is strong, that institutions will endure, that no individual or movement can shake what has been built over centuries. But history shows otherwise. Every empire that believed itself untouchable eventually discovered how fragile its pillars truly were. The fractures were always there, small, silent, waiting. The first crack appears when loyalty begins to waver. Not loyalty in the form of chants at rallies or bold words on social media, but the quieter kind, the loyalty of advisors, lawmakers, allies abroad, and ordinary citizens who once believed stability was permanent. When that loyalty shifts even slightly, it signals something far greater than discontent. It signals a loss of faith in the system itself. And once faith erodes, power no longer rests on the rule of law or the consent of it. It rests only on force, fear, or manipulation. The second crack emerges in legitimacy. Courts, agencies, and institutions once respected as impartial become viewed through partisan eyes. Every ruling, every investigation, every action is questioned as biased or corrupt. The system begins to consume itself, because when legitimacy is gone, every outcome becomes suspect. No verdict satisfies, no election heals, no law restores confidence. The people begin to feel as though the game is rigged, and in that perception lies the seed of collapse. For a nation cannot function when its citizens no longer believe in the fairness of its core. The third crack forms in unity. The divisions were always present, but they sharpen until compromise is no longer possible. Neighbors become enemies, communities fracture, and politics becomes war by other means. Each side sees the other not as rivals, but as threats, not as opponents, but as enemies of the nation itself. In such an atmosphere, every issue becomes existential, every disagreement becomes a crisis, and every compromise becomes betrayal. That is when fractures harden into fault lines, and fault lines turn into earthquakes. And yet, the most dangerous crack of all is the one hidden deepest, the erosion of confidence within the halls of power. Publicly, leaders smile, speak boldly, and promise stability. But behind closed doors, doubt seeps into conversations once filled with certainty. Those who once stood firm begin to distance themselves, calculating how long they can remain aligned before the ground shifts beneath them. This is the crack that topples regimes, the one that transforms allies into deserters, friends into foes. It is invisible until it is too late, until the moment when everyone looks around and realizes the structure they depended on has already crumbled. The cracks beneath the surface are not just political, they are cultural, economic, even spiritual. They spread into universities, workplaces, homes, and media. They shape the way people see their own country, their own future, their own place in the world. When half a nation believes in one truth and the other half believes in its opposite, there is no longer a shared reality to hold them together. And when that shared reality collapses, the very idea of nationhood is at stake. Some will dismiss these cracks as exaggerations, insisting that America has faced worse before and survived. But survival is not guaranteed. Every generation believes it is stronger than the last, that its institutions are unbreakable, that its people are too resilient to ever fall, yet history is merciless. Rome thought the same, so did countless empires that now live only in books and ruins. What destroys them is rarely a single battle or leader. It is always the slow, silent weakening beneath the surface, the erosion that no one notices until the walls come crashing down. The trouble runs deeper than any scandal, deeper than any election, deeper than any single man. It is the kind of trouble that lingers in the shadows, waiting for a moment of weakness to reveal itself in full force. And when it does, the shock will be total, because so many refuse to see the cracks forming right beneath their feet. Power is never neutral. Authority, once designed to protect, can be twisted into something far more dangerous. A government built on balance, on separation, on accountability becomes unrecognizable the moment those tools are turned inward, not against enemies of the state, but against rivals within. Laws meant to safeguard justice can be reshaped into weapons of intimidation. Agencies that once inspired trust can be wielded as instruments of fear. And when that transformation begins, it rarely stops, it spreads, it consumes the very foundations it was meant to defend. The warning signs are clear to those who choose to see. Indictments, investigations, raids, and hearings, these are not just legal processes anymore. They are battlegrounds. Every subpoena becomes a shot fired. Every courtroom becomes a front line. Justice ceases to be blind. Instead, it is guided by ideology, driven by vengeance, fueled by calculation. The people notice, even if they cannot articulate it, they sense that justice no longer feels impartial, that the scales are being tipped deliberately, and with that realization, faith begins to die. This weaponization of authority corrodes from the inside out. At first, it looks like strength, a show of control meant to project stability. But in truth, it is weakness disguised as power. Strong nations do not need to weaponize their institutions, only fragile ones do. When the law is turned into a blade rather than a shield, it cuts through the very trust that gives it meaning. And once that trust is gone, laws are nothing more than words on paper, enforced not by respect but by fear. It is not just the courts or the agencies that become compromised. The media, once a watchdog, transforms into an echo chamber, amplifying whichever narrative aligns with the agenda of the moment. Headlines blur fact and opinion until they are indistinguishable. Stories are framed not to inform but to convict or absolve in the court of public perception. And perception, once poisoned, becomes reality. A nation guided by perception rather than truth is a nation standing on shifting sand, always one step from collapse. The danger runs deeper still. When authority becomes a weapon, division becomes permanent. Those who support the use of power cheer loudly, blind to the precedent being set. They fail to realize that the same weapons they celebrate today can and will be used against them tomorrow. Once unleashed, this cycle of retribution never ends. It hardens into the culture, shaping generations to come. Every side begins to see the other not as political opponents, but as enemies to be crushed by any means necessary. The line between law and vendetta disappears. And what happens to the citizen caught in the middle? Confusion, fear, disillusionment. They no longer know which institutions to trust, which leaders to believe, which voices to follow. They watch as the system bends, as those who are supposed to uphold fairness bend with it, and they begin to wonder if fairness ever truly existed at all. Cynicism spreads like wildfire. Voter turnout declines, participation in civic life withers, and apathy becomes the silent killer of democracy. But the most devastating consequence of weaponized authority is not apathy, it is resistance. A people who no longer trust their institutions will eventually rebel against them. Sometimes that rebellion is quiet, manifesting in protests, in strikes, in disobedience. Other times it is explosive, boiling over into the streets when pressure can no longer be contained. History shows this pattern again and again. When power is abused, collapse follows, whether gradual or sudden. No society has ever survived long when its rulers turn the machinery of governance against its own citizens. This is the storm few dare to name aloud. The rivalries of today are not simply political, they are existential. If authority continues to be weaponized, the very idea of rule by consent crumbles. A nation can survive scandal, it can survive corruption, it can even survive poor leadership. But it cannot survive the destruction of its core institutions. Once the people no longer believe in the fairness of law, the legitimacy of courts, or the independence of agencies, the republic itself becomes hollow, a shell of appearances with nothing beneath. And make no mistake, enemies abroad are watching. They see the weaponization of authority not as strength but as opportunity. Every crack in legitimacy is an opening for influence, every abuse of power a chance to spread propaganda, every act of partisanship a way to erode confidence in the very idea of democracy. They do not have to destroy America with bombs or missiles. All they must do is watch as America turns its own weapons inward, weakening itself from within. The question is no longer whether the law will be tested. It already has been. The question is how far the testing will go and how long the system can endure before it breaks. Will institutions recover? restoring balance and impartiality, or will they descend further into tools of punishment and protection? The answer will decide not just the fate of leaders, but the fate of the republic itself. And if the path of weaponization continues, the trouble that follows will not only run deeper than America realizes, it may run too deep to ever repair. Trust is the invisible thread that holds a nation together. It does not appear on ballots, it is not written into constitutions, and it cannot be enforced by law. Yet, without it, no society can survive. Once people stop believing in their leaders, their institutions, and even their neighbors, the fabric of the nation begins to unravel. The erosion does not happen in an instant. It creeps in slowly, like water through cracks in stone, until one day the structure collapses and no one can remember exactly when it began. The erosion of trust begins subtly. Citizens hear promises that never materialize, watch investigations that lead nowhere, witness leaders say one thing and do another. Each disappointment is small on its own, but together they build a pattern that cannot be ignored. People start to ask themselves whether justice is real, whether fairness is possible, whether the voices of ordinary citizens still matter in the halls of power. The more they question, the weaker the bond between governed and government becomes. And once that bond is broken, no amount of speeches or policies can restore it easily. Supporters will always rally. They will chant, they will defend, they will justify. But the real test of strength is not found in the voices of the faithful. It is in the silence of the middle. The moderates, the independents, the undecided, when they grow quiet, it is not apathy but doubt. They stop believing the system can deliver answers. They turn away from politics, from media, even from conversations about the future. This silence is louder than any protest because it signals that trust has already been abandoned. And once the middle breaks, polarization becomes permanent. Trust does not only erode vertically from people toward institutions, but horizontally as well. Citizens lose trust in one another. They stop believing their neighbors act in good faith. Every disagreement becomes a sign of corruption, every opposing view a mark of betrayal. Communities fracture, families divide, friendships dissolve. When the people no longer trust each other, the very concept of unity becomes impossible. A nation divided at this level is a nation vulnerable to manipulation, because mistrust makes it easy for outside forces to exploit fear and amplify conflict. The media accelerates this erosion. Headlines no longer aim to inform but to provoke. Outlets present not facts but narratives, designed to keep audiences enraged and loyal. People consume only the voices that confirm their worldview, rejecting anything that challenges it as propaganda. Soon truth itself becomes fractured, with two realities existing side by side. When one nation lives inside two opposing realities, trust between citizens disintegrates completely. How can a people move forward when they cannot even agree on what is real? The courts, once seen as the final guardians of fairness, are not spared either. Every verdict is interpreted as victory or conspiracy, never as impartial justice. Those who lose accuse the system of corruption. Those who win celebrate but know their triumph is fragile, likely to be reversed when the balance of power shifts. Trust in the rule of law evaporates, replaced by the belief that outcomes depend only on who holds power, not on what is right. Without faith in law, citizens turn to loyalty, identity, and force as their guides. That path leads only to chaos. Even the economy reflects this erosion. When people lose trust in leaders and institutions, they lose confidence in markets, in trade, in the future. They hold back investments. They question the stability of their currency. They wonder if their nation is still a safe place to build their lives. The loss of trust at the personal level transforms into hesitation at the national level. Growth slows, innovation weakens, and decline sets in. Not because of lack of resources, but because of lack of belief. The erosion of trust is perhaps the most dangerous of all troubles, because it cannot be solved with force. You can deploy armies, you can write laws, you can build walls, but none of it matters if the people no longer believe. Once trust is gone, every action of authority is viewed with suspicion. Even the truth sounds like a lie, even fairness looks like corruption, even progress feels like manipulation. In such an environment, even the most honest leader cannot govern, because the foundation of belief is already shattered. History is filled with nations that collapsed not from invasion but from the decay of trust. When citizens turned against one another, when institutions lost credibility, when leaders were seen as illegitimate, the fall became inevitable. The strength of a nation lies not in its weapons or wealth, but in the belief of its people that the system still works. Take away that belief, and the mightiest republic becomes fragile glass, waiting for a single blow to shatter it. The silence spreading through the heart of America today is not apathy. It is a warning. It is the sound of trust eroding, of belief collapsing. And when trust is gone, when people no longer see hope in ballots, in courts, in voices of authority, they will seek answers elsewhere. Sometimes in anger, sometimes in violence. always in ways that reshape history forever. The erosion of trust is not the end of politics, it is the beginning of something far more dangerous. Storms always reveal what calm days keep hidden. When the skies are clear, when the markets are steady, when politics moves in predictable patterns, it is easy to believe the foundation beneath is solid. But when the winds rise and the ground begins to shake, the truth cannot be disguised. Cracks widen, masks slip, and what was once carefully buried in shadows is forced into the light. Exposure is the most merciless reckoning because it does not ask for permission. It simply strips away illusion and demands the world face reality. Exposure arrives in moments of crisis, legal battles that uncover secret dealings, economic downturns that reveal weaknesses long ignored, foreign conflicts that test alliances built on fragile promises. Each moment peels back another layer of the carefully crafted image. What once appeared untouchable begins to look vulnerable. What once seemed like unshakable loyalty begins to fracture under pressure. The reckoning of exposure is brutal because it does not allow retreat. Once the truth is visible, it cannot be unseen. This moment forces not just leaders but entire nations to confront their reflection. When authority is revealed as corrupt, when justice is revealed as partisan, when power is revealed as self-serving, people must decide whether they can continue to follow or whether they must resist. Exposure does not simply reveal individuals, it reveals systems. It shows whether institutions were built on real strength or only on perception. And when perception collapses, legitimacy collapses with it. Enemies abroad understand this better than anyone. They wait patiently for exposure because it weakens without firing a shot. Each scandal, each trial, each crisis becomes an opportunity to whisper in the ears of allies, to offer alternatives, to present themselves as more stable, more reliable. The more exposure spreads, the more influence slips away. A nation once feared and respected becomes a subject of ridicule, not because of what enemies did, but because of what was revealed within. But exposure is not just external. It is internal, psychological. The people themselves feel betrayed. They believed in fairness and transparency in a system that would correct itself. But when exposure reveals manipulation, when truths come out that prove long-standing suspicions, anger begins to replace faith. That anger is not confined to one group or one ideology. It spreads across the spectrum, uniting those who otherwise share nothing, bound by the common feeling that they have been lied to, that their trust has been abused. And when anger unites across divisions, it is no longer controllable. Exposure also transforms supporters. Some double down, clinging even harder to their loyalty, refusing to accept what is now undeniable. Others fall silent, ashamed or uncertain, unable to defend what has been revealed. Still others turn, abandoning the figure or movement they once championed, recognizing that the cost of denial has grown too great. In this way, exposure reshapes the battlefield. Lines of loyalty are redrawn not by persuasion but by revelation. The reckoning of exposure has another consequence. It accelerates history. Events that might have taken decades to unfold collapse into months, even weeks. Institutions once thought permanent crumble overnight. Leaders once thought invincible are suddenly powerless. Alliances shift with breathtaking speed. Exposure does not allow the luxury of gradual change. It forces transformation in real time, leaving no room for hesitation. And yet exposure also offers clarity. For all its pain, it removes doubt. No longer can people hide behind ignorance or claim they did not know. The truth, once exposed, forces decisions. Will the nation choose to rebuild its foundations, to restore integrity, to confront its weaknesses honestly? Or will it choose denial, anger, and collapse? Exposure does not decide the outcome, but it sets the stage where choices must be made, where history will record who had the courage to face the truth and who chose to look away. The reckoning of exposure is unstoppable. No amount of propaganda, no army of lawyers, no media campaign can erase what is laid bare. Attempts to spin the truth only deepen the damage because people recognize desperation when they see it. Once revealed, the hidden becomes the headline, the private becomes the public, and the whispers become the roar. The storm does not just pass, it reshapes the landscape forever. This is where the nation now stands, on the edge of exposure's final blow. The deeper the trouble runs, the more devastating the revelations will be when they surface. And they will surface. The question is not if but when. Not whether the cracks will be seen, but how long the people will tolerate the pretense that everything is fine. The reckoning is already unfolding and the world is watching. The only uncertainty is how much of the foundation will still be standing when the storm clears.